Welcome to this video interview, Liliana and Daniel. And I also want to congratulate you on the book that was published. It is called Diaspora and Law, Culture, Religion and Jurisprudence Beyond Sovereignty. My sincere congratulations on the publication. Well, can you tell me, what kind of book is it?
So this is actually the result of a conference that Liliana and myself were organizing in Berlin in the year 2019. We thought it by then very timely to discuss the issue, especially of law in connection with diaspora, since at least in the German discussion, that was by then a kind of a blind spot in the discussion about the law. Also, the discussion about law and religion, which is well established in other contexts, was a little bit lagging behind in Germany. And so we gathered this event. It was an international conference, 2 days, and this is a result of the papers of that conference.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Now I read on the back cover, this book discusses pressing questions of how to live together in the new millennium. And to me, this sounds like very relevant in nowadays times. Can you tell us something of the outcome of discussing this question?
Firstly, the proposal was to take the Jewish history and the history of the diaspora as a treasure of experience to deal with culture of law of majorities, and how to try to defend the right to difference and conviviality with the law of the state, and thus in different times and in different countries and cultures. That was the beginning. And then we understand that a lot of questions and problematic also from Muslims that began to be discussed in Germany could be also be think in this correlation to the Jewish experience.
And are there any lessons learned from the book that you could share?
I think it's very important to, as Liliana already said, to bring together different debates, which are usually quite separate. The one is a kind of a well-established Jewish debate on law under non-sovereign conditions. What does it mean to have legal regulations in a way, in a context where there's no state actor? This is obviously an issue in the Jewish tradition, at least since the Talmud. There we can speak about details later. And then second, discussion on cultural pluralism and law, which is usually rather from the other side, aside from the regulating state. And thirdly, a discussion on diaspora, which is usually led in cultural studies and which is much focused on European minorities in Europe. So these three debates or discourses that actually meet each other quite well and are usually very much apart. So this was really kind of, I think, productive to bring that together. Another issue would be that some papers also discuss very specific questions. For example, how is the end of life being regulated in minority cultures? That would always point to the fact that there are always general questions and kind of abstract problems, but also a lot of very concrete problems. So the traditions have a lot of problem-solving models already in store, and it's well worth to revisit them and to avoid these kind of abstract confrontations between universalism and pluralism, for example.
Well, that sounds to me like an important conclusion that you say there is already so much in storage. Well, now for our followers, the resilience followers are mostly interested in religious studies. What would you like to say about the relation between law and religion? That's also included in your book, I understood. Can you tell us something of the highlights in this book on this topic?
I think in general, it's important to understand that Judaism and also Islam is not only a religion, it's also a law. a law which is also followed in Judaism from people who are not religious at all, secular Jews. I was working, for example, around the problem of burial in different countries, because there are so many secular Jews who want to be buried in a Jewish cemetery, and how there are sometimes problems between the law of the state and the Jewish law in the cemeteries, but they're in burial. So I think for the people interested in religious studies, it's important to understand that the religion is not only a question of faith, but also a question of the law, and how to live with that, with the whole thing which our life had, and death is very special, because at the end, also their own culture and their own law is more important, or probably so important as the law of the majority.
It's also, I think, for legal studies, again, probably, especially in the German context, usually jurisprudence is seen as an essentially secular discipline that has nothing to do with religion. It's also the kind of following the liberal model of a religiously neutral state, which in Germany then effectively is not that neutral, right? There's a lot of myth in that idea that the state is religiously neutral. In fact, as said before, there are always compromises and negotiations underway between religious actors and juridical actors. And it was then also it was important to also rethink what does it mean? What does the very idea of law mean if we don't always consider it as essentially a secular agency?
Thank you, Danielle, for this edition, and also Lilian. I think it makes the book very valuable to read, not only for scholars, but also for others, maybe. We have come to the end of the interview. Is there something left you would like to say about the book, or what you got from the research?
We might say that it was intended as a beginning. It's not a kind of a closing discussion. I think these are issues that should be discussed in an ongoing way. Ideally, also not as Liliana said, not focused on one tradition, but on several. I mean, we also appreciated that there were also voices that, or there are voices that address the situation in the United States, where the discussion is quite different. So I think that it's actually a very well worth comparative case that should be taken into account further.
Yeah.
I think we propose to see this difference in the laws as a possibility and not as a problem only. So each law system can learn something from each other. So we try to show it as in the book.
Well, this seems to me a very nice and valuable ending of this interview. I thank you both, Daniel Weidner and Liliana Ruth Feierstein, for this interview, and I wish you all the best for your continued research on these topics.
Thank you for your interest and for the
Thank you.
You're welcome.